Hey, what is up everyone? I'm back again with another review. Today I'll be reviewing the Darmoshark M3, the Motospeed X6. But just a quick disclaimer, these two mice were sent out to me by Darmoshark, but of course, that doesn't affect my thoughts and opinions for this review. Before we start things off, I just want to say, if you guys like these reviews or these types of videos, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel and with me making more of these videos for you guys. But with that being said, let's get on with the review. So to start things off, let's talk about the Darmoshark M3 Kiran. This is what comes in the box. You get your skates, you also get 4 dot skates, as well as a sticker. You also get the ring skate over here, and a 1K receiver, and your USB Type-C cable. Now let's talk about the build quality of the Darmoshark M3. The build quality on the M3 hasn't really been that bad compared to what I've seen with other people's Darmoshark M3s. But of course, I've only had this for about a week. In my opinion, the build quality just isn't as good as compared to, say, my VXE R1 Pro Max, which is, in my opinion, still very solid to this day. There is slight creaking on this unit, but it's not really as bad as to the shell integrity of the M3. The M3 shell integrity just feels super thin. I feel like if I death grip this, it would just break into pieces. It's just, in my opinion, it's just not as good as other budget options like the VXE R1 Pro Max. Now moving on, the shape of the Darmoshark M3 is actually based on the original ultralight, as well as other Finalmouse shapes like the Air 58 or the Scream 1, but it's just a tad bit longer. What I can say about the shape is that it's actually fairly comfortable. It's just that I find it a little too long. Comparing it to the Lamzo Maya X over here, the hump is actually pretty similar in wideness. It's actually very nice and comfortable like the Maya X. And then for the Viper V3 Pro over here, the length is definitely a lot longer compared to the Viper V3 Pro. Now looking at EloShapes over here, you can definitely see that the Darmoshark M3's shape is quite inspired to the original Finalmouse shapes like the Ultralight Pro, Scream 1, and Air 58. I'd say it's only slightly longer, wider, and slightly shorter in terms of height compared to the Finalmouse shapes. Now even for my hand size, which is 21 by 10 centimeters, I still feel like the Darmoshark M3 is a little bit too big for me. Mainly because whenever I grip my mouse, I tend to use claw grip whenever I do horizontal movements. But when I do some slight micro adjustments or do vertical movements, I tend to use my fingertips a little bit more. And with the Darmoshark M3 being a little bit on the larger side of things, it definitely feels a lot more off compared to the Lamzo Maya X over here, as well as my Viper V3 Pro. It just feels a tad too big for me. I feel like if they made it so it's a lot more closer in terms of length, width, and size to the original Finalmouse shapes like the Ultralight Pro, Scream 1, and Air 58, I feel like I would enjoy that a lot more. But for people that doesn't really have the same problem as mine, I feel like you would definitely find the Darmoshark M3 quite comfortable. The Darmoshark M3 uses a PixArt PAW3395 for its sensor and supports up to 26,000 dpi as well as to 2000 Hz polling rate. Now I only have the 1K Hz polling dongle over here, but I believe you can buy a separate dongle for the M3 to support up to 2000 Hz polling. Looking at the bottom layout of the Darmoshark M3, you have your DPI button over here on the left side, and on the middle you have your power button. Flick it to the right for you to be able to use your 2.4 GHz dongle, and then flick it to the left for you to be able to use your Bluetooth. And then in the middle, it's your power off button. Over on the right, you have your polling rate, and then you have these 4 corner skates over here, and then as well as a dongle storage, which is actually a little bit hard to get off, but as you can see, this is where your dongle sits. I also want to talk about the sensor position on the M3. The sensor position on the M3 is actually lower compared to other mice over here, where it's at the middle area, as you can see. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the sensor position of the Darmoshark M3. The way I want my sensor position is for it to line up over here. So basically, it lines up with my thumb as well as this area of my fingers compared to the Darmoshark M3 sensor position. So this is how I would comfortably claw grip this mouse. So as you can see, my thumb is slightly higher than the sensor over here, and then it lines up a little bit more. So this is where the sensor is. It lines up a little bit more towards my knuckles. So I'm not really a big fan of how the sensor precision of the Darmoshark M3 is. It's just a little bit too low for me. And before that, I didn't even know how much sensor positioning could affect your gameplay, but after using the Darmoshark M3, it definitely did. So if you're not a big fan of mice having lower sensor precision, then I definitely do not recommend the Darmoshark M3. Now, for the coating of the Darmoshark M3, this has a slightly dry and chalky coating. It's not really that bad, but it's definitely not as good as my Viper V3 Pro over here, or even the coating on the Skyrox V8. I'd say that it's still very grippy whenever my hands tend to get warm and moist. It definitely has the ability to be grippy, but it's definitely not as grippy as a rubberized coating on my Viper V3 and my Skyrox V8 over here. Now for the skates of the Darmoshark M3, like I said earlier, these has 4 corner skates over here, and the skate is actually pretty nice. It's nice and fast, and it doesn't really feel as bad as other mice that I've tested. So in my opinion, the skates on the Darmoshark M3 is actually very, very good. So moving on to the review, let's talk about the Motospeed X6. So what comes inside the box, you have your skates, extra skates, as well as some grip tapes, your user manual, as well as your warranty. And then you also have your USB Type-C cable over here, as well as your dongle. This is actually an 8K dongle, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the build quality on the Motospeed X6. The build quality on this thing is a lot better compared to the build quality on the Darmoshark M3 that I have over here. This thing feels a lot more solid and a lot more stable. The shell feels a lot better compared to the Darmoshark M3. Even if I death grip this thing, I don't really feel any flexing nor creaking whatsoever. So in my opinion, build quality of the X6 just feels so much better than the Darmoshark M3. Now, moving on to the shape of the Motospeed X6. The shape is actually really nice to claw grip. It's a lot better to claw grip than my R1 Pro Max over here. As you can see, the sides on the Pro Max or the R1 Pro Max are a lot more flatter compared to the Motospeed X6 over here. I'd say it's quite similar to my Skyrox V8's sides, where they're both flared inwards. These two mice are a lot better to claw grip in my opinion than the VXC R1 Pro Max. One of the things that I don't really like about the side of the Motospeed X6 though is there's this weird bump area over here, as you can see, as well as over here on the left side underneath these side buttons. It just feels quite off for me. I don't know why it's there. I believe it's for finger placement, but I'm not really sure why it's so high up. It could have been placed a little bit more on this area, or downwards, a little bit more lower. So I'm not really sure why it's so high up. It definitely gets in the way of finger placement, so in my opinion, I'm just not really a big fan of it. Now for the hump is actually a lot more pointier compared to my Skyrox V8. As you can see over here, the V8 has a more rounded hump compared to the X6, where the hump kind of points upward a little bit more on the middle area, quite similar to the hump of the R1 Pro Max over here. Although the hump placement is actually a lot higher on the X6, which makes it a lot better to claw grip. So in hand feel, the hump of the R1 as well as my X6 feels quite similar. It's just that the X6 is slightly taller. It gives more contact on the middle knuckle over here compared to my Skyrox V8 over here, where the hump is a lot more rounded, so it feels quite nicer to claw grip. But in my opinion, the hump on this is still really good. It's just that it pokes a little bit more on my middle knuckle over on my hand. Now, looking at EloShapes, you can definitely see that the Motospeed X6 is quite similar to the Ninjusto Sora 4K over here. It's only slightly longer, wider, and slightly taller than the Ninjusto Sora 4K. But comparing it to the R1 Pro Max, you can definitely see that the hump on the Motospeed X6 is a lot more towards the, or a little bit more towards the back compared to the R1 Pro Max over here, where it's a lot more towards the middle. Even though they're both the same or like nearly the same height, you can definitely feel the difference between the two. So in my opinion, the Motospeed X6 just feels a lot better, for me at least, to claw grip. Now, for the specs of the Motospeed X6, this uses a Pixart PAW3395, supports up to 26,000 DPI as well as to 8K polling rate. I believe this also has a max version called the X6 Max, and that one has a Pixart PAW3950, supports up to 30,000 DPI as well as up to 8,000 Hz polling rate. What I really like about the X6 is that the dongle, this one actually is the 8K dongle. You don't even need a separate dongle for it, which actually is very interesting because this is the first time I've seen a dongle this small that is capable of 8,000 Hz polling rate. Normally, you get a mouse, it supports up to 8,000 Hz polling rate, but you need a separate dongle, like say this one. This is a dongle for the Xiaopin Z1 Pro Max that I have, which is I'm actually going to be reviewing sometime soon. But this is the 8K dongle for it, which is actually a lot larger and not even a USB type dongle. So it's actually really interesting that the Motospeed X6's dongle is capable of up to 8K polling rate. Now for the bottom layout of the Motospeed X6, over here on the left side you have your DPI button, and on the right side you have your on and off switch, as well as your full-size case over here. And unfortunately this doesn't have the capability of Bluetooth, but in my opinion you don't really need Bluetooth since you have your micro dongle over here, which is capable of 8K Hz polling rate. So in my opinion, don't really need Bluetooth. Now the coating on the Motospeed X6 is actually quite similar to the Darmoshark M3 over here, where it's a dry, slightly chalky coating. And in my opinion, it's definitely a lot better than other mice that I've tried where the coating just isn't really as good. It's definitely not as good, like I said earlier, than say my Skyrox V8 over here, where it's more rubberized coating on the V8. But in my opinion, the coating's still really good. Whenever my hands get warm and moist, it definitely gets slightly grippier. So in my opinion, very good coating on the Motospeed X6. Now, should you or should you not get the Motospeed X6 or the Darmoshark M3? Now, in my opinion, the Darmoshark M3 just isn't really a good budget option. Now, I can't really say the same for its other variants like the Darmoshark M3 4K, M3 Pro, or the new M3 Pro Max. But for the M3 itself, it's not really a good option in my opinion. You can definitely get a much better mouse like the R1 Pro Max, which feels a lot more nicer, a lot more sturdier than the Darmoshark M3. Or you can also get the Xiaopin Z2 or maybe even the ATK X1 for larger style of mice. Just in my opinion, not really a good budget option. But for the Motospeed X6, if you're looking for something that's quite similar to the Sora 4K or the Endgame Gear XM2, this is definitely a mouse that you should try and get. It's nice and comfortable, the skates are quite nice, and supports up to 8K Hz polling. So in my opinion, just a really good budget option. Now, obviously, I've only had both mice for about a week, so I can't really say for the long term. Maybe in the future, I'll make another video updating the long term usage of both mice. But for now, don't recommend the Darmoshark M3, but I do recommend the Motospeed X6. Anyways, that's it for my review of the Motospeed X6 and the Darmoshark M3. I'll leave a link down in the description below to where you can get these two, as well as to my affiliate links and discount codes for other brands. Now, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps out a lot with the channel and for me to be able to make more videos like this in the future. Make sure to follow me on my socials to get notified whenever I post new content, as well as to my streams. Links to those will be down in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.